Sunsets over Colorado by Simon Cross. The sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mountainside as Katherine Montgomery stepped down from the stagecoach. After 3 days of travel from St. Louis, her legs trembled beneath her, and she leaned against the weathered wood of the coach to steady herself. Copper Creek wasn't much to look at, a single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, their sides bleached by the relentless mountain sun. "First time in Copper Creek, ma'am?" The driver handed down her trunk, his leathery face creased with amusement. "Is it that obvious?" Katherine smoothed her travel-worn dress, conscious of the curious glances from the townspeople. "Most newcomers have that same look." He gestured toward the largest building on the street. "The Colorado Inn has clean rooms. Tell Mrs. Wilson that Frank sent you." Katherine nodded her thanks and gathered her courage along with her belongings. At 26, she had left behind everything familiar to claim the ranch her uncle had bequeathed her. The solicitor's letter had arrived 3 months after Uncle William's passing, and Katherine, with nothing but memories tying her to Missouri, had decided to accept the inheritance. The Colorado Inn smelled of pine soap and fresh bread. Miss Wilson, a plump woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, looked Katherine over with undisguised curiosity. "Another city woman," she remarked, taking Katherine's payment. "Your uncle's place is 5 miles north. Been sitting empty since William passed." "Did you know him well?" Katherine asked. Everyone knew William Montgomery, kept to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. Mrs. Wilson handed her a heavy iron key. "Rooms upstairs, first on the right. Supper's at 6. Katherine had just begun unpacking when a knock sounded at her door. A young woman with copper-red hair stood in the hallway, her freckled face friendly. "I'm Sarah Wilson. Mother sent me to tell you that Mr. Thorne is downstairs asking after you." "Mr. Thorne? I don't know any Mr. Thorne." Sarah's eyes widened. "Everyone knows Matthew Thorne. His ranch borders your uncle's property. He manages half the cattle business in the county." Katherine followed Sarah downstairs to find a tall man standing by the front desk. He turned as they approached, and Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Matthew Thorne had the kind of face that suggested both strength and gentleness, tanned skin, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Miss Montgomery," his voice was deep, with a subtle drawl. "I heard William's niece had arrived. Thought I'd offer to show you to your property tomorrow." Katherine's pride warred with practicality. "That's very kind, Mr. Thorne, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition." His gaze was direct, assessing. "Your uncle was a good man. Least I can do is help his kin get settled." Something in his tone suggested there was more to his offer than simple neighborliness, but Katherine was in no position to refuse guidance. "Then I accept. Thank you." The following morning, Matthew arrived with a wagon and 2 horses tied behind. Katherine had spent a restless night imagining snakes, bears, and bandits awaiting her at the isolated ranch. The reality of Matthew Thorne, however, was far more unsettling than any imagined danger. In daylight, she could see that his shoulders were broad beneath his faded blue shirt, his forearms tanned and corded with muscle as he handled the reins. He helped her into the wagon with a touch that was both impersonal and somehow intimate. "Your uncle's place needs work," he said as they left town behind. "Roof's sound, but the fences need mending, and the well pump's temperamental." "You seem to know a lot about my property, Mr. Thorne." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "I made a promise to William that I'd look after things until you decided what to do with the place." "And what do you expect me to do with it?" His glance was quick, questioning. "Sell it, I figured. Most city women don't take to ranch life." Katherine lifted her chin. "I'm not most women, Mr. Thorne." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "We'll see." The landscape opened before them, vast expanses of mesa and forest, mountains rising in the distance. After an hour's travel, Matthew turned the wagon onto a narrow track that led to a small valley cradled between pine-covered slopes. "There it is," he said quietly. "Montgomery Ranch." The cabin was sturdy but weathered, with a wide porch facing the valley. A barn and corral stood nearby, and beyond them, a creek sparkled in the morning light. Katherine felt an unexpected surge of emotion. This wild, beautiful place was hers. "It's lovely," she said softly. Matthew's expression softened. "William always said it was the most beautiful spot in Colorado." Inside, the cabin was simple but solid. 2 rooms with fieldstone fireplaces, rough-hewn furniture, and windows that framed the mountains. Matthew showed her how to work the pump and stove, explaining that he'd stocked the pantry with basic supplies. "Why would you do all this?" Katherine asked. "You hardly know me." Matthew paused, his hand resting on the mantel. "Your uncle saved my life once. I owed him." Over the next weeks, Katherine learned the rhythms of ranch life. Miss Wilson's daughter Sarah became a frequent visitor, teaching Katherine to make soap and preserve vegetables from the small garden behind the cabin. Matthew appeared every few days, ostensibly to check on the property but staying longer each time. Together they mended fences, repaired the barn roof, and rounded up the small herd of cattle that had been William's livelihood. Katherine discovered muscles she never knew she had and a resilience that surprised her. Each evening she fell into bed exhausted but strangely content. One afternoon she was struggling with the well pump when Matthew rode into the yard. He dismounted in one fluid motion and crossed to her, taking the handle. "Like this," he said, his body close behind hers as he guided her movements. "You need to prime it first, then give it 3 steady strokes." The pump groaned, then gushed clear water. Katherine laughed with triumph, turning to find Matthew's face inches from hers. For a moment they stood frozen, the air between them charged with unspoken awareness. Matthew stepped back first. "You're learning fast," he said, his voice rough. That night, unable to sleep, Katherine sat on her porch watching moonlight silver the valley. The sound of hoofbeats made her tense, but it was only Matthew riding slowly toward the cabin. "Everything all right?" she called. He dismounted, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Saw your lamp. Thought I'd check on you." "At midnight?" Matthew ran a hand through his hair. "Truth is, I couldn't sleep. Been thinking about things." "What things?" "Your uncle's will had conditions I never told you about." He paced the length of the porch. "The ranch isn't yours free and clear. It's yours for 1 year. If you stay that long, it's yours permanently. If not, it goes to me." Katherine felt cold despite the summer night. "Why wouldn't you tell me this?" "Because I wanted you to have a fair chance." His voice was low and tense. "If you knew, you might have felt obligated or threatened." "And now? Why tell me now?" Matthew stopped before her. "Because I find myself hoping you'll stay, and not just because of the land." The admission hung between them, as vast and unpredictable as the Colorado sky. Autumn came to the valley in a blaze of color. Katherine had settled into a routine, learning from both Sarah and Matthew about survival in the mountains. The first frost painted the windows with delicate patterns, and Matthew arrived with firewood and supplies for winter. "Storm's coming," he said, stacking logs by the fireplace. "Might be snowed in for days." Katherine smiled. "I'm prepared. Sarah showed me how to preserve enough food for weeks." Matthew's gaze lingered on her face. "You've changed." "For better or worse?" "Better." His voice softened. "Much better." The snowstorm arrived that night, howling around the cabin like a living thing. Katherine woke to a world transformed, drifts piled against the door and windows glazed with ice. For 3 days she was truly alone for the first time, and she discovered that solitude had its own quiet beauty. On the 4th day, as she was melting snow for washing, the door burst open. Matthew stood in the entrance, his coat crusted with snow and his face tight with worry. "You're all right," he said, relief evident in his voice. Katherine smiled. "Did you think a little snow would defeat me?" 4 feet isn't a little snow." He removed his coat, revealing a package wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something." It was a book, a collection of poetry by Emily Dickinson. Katherine ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "How did you know?" "Found some of her poems among your uncle's things. Figured you might have similar tastes." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. "Thank you, Matthew." He stayed for supper, and they talked long into the evening. Matthew spoke of his childhood in Texas, his journey north after the war, and his friendship with William. Katherine shared stories of her life in Missouri, her dreams of adventure, and her growing love for the rugged beauty of Colorado. As the fire burned low, Matthew fell silent, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I should go," he said finally, rising from his chair. "In this weather? You'd freeze before you reached your ranch." He hesitated, and Katherine realized what she had offered. The storm. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said quickly. "Don't be ridiculous. The sofa is perfectly comfortable." That night, knowing Matthew was just across the room, Katherine lay awake listening to the storm and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Something was changing between them, something as inevitable as the seasons. Winter gave way to spring, and with the thaw came new challenges. A mountain lion killed 2 calves, and Matthew taught Katherine to use a rifle. Together they tracked the predator, and it was Katherine who fired the shot that drove it away from their herds. "Our herds," Matthew corrected when she mentioned it. "Your cattle and mine graze the same land now." The casual words held deeper meaning, and Katherine found herself watching Matthew when he wasn't looking. The way he moved with natural grace, the gentleness of his hands when he tended injured animals, the rare smile that transformed his solemn face. One evening in late spring, they rode to the highest point on the property. Below them, the valley was a tapestry of green and gold, cattle dotting the meadows like tiny figurines. "A year ago, I would never have imagined this life," Katherine said, dismounting to stand at the edge of the bluff. Matthew joined her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment." She turned to face him. "My time here is almost up. According to the will, I'll soon own this place outright." Something flickered in his eyes, not disappointment, as she had feared, but uncertainty. "And then I'll need help running it properly." Katherine gathered her courage. "I was thinking of a partnership." "A partnership," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "Unless you had something else in mind." Matthew's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as summer rain. "I've had something else in mind since the day you arrived." Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the space between one breath and the next. The second was a promise, deep and sure as the mountains surrounding them. When they returned to the cabin, twilight was settling over the valley. Matthew built a fire while Katherine prepared a simple meal. They ate together in comfortable silence, exchanged glances filled with new awareness. "We should talk about the future," Matthew said as they cleared away the dishes. Katherine leaned against the sink, suddenly nervous. "What about it?" "I'm not offering partnership, Katherine. I'm offering marriage." The directness of his proposal took her breath away. "Matthew, hear me out." He took her hands in his. "I've watched you transform from a city woman to someone who belongs here. You've faced every challenge with courage and determination. I admire that. I admire you." "Is admiration enough for marriage?" His eyes darkened. "It's more than admiration, and you know it." Katherine did know. She had seen it in the way he looked at her, felt it in the way he touched her, with reverence and restrained desire. "What about the ranch?" she asked. "We'll run it together. Equal partners in everything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't want your land, Katherine. I want you." Summer returned to the valley, bringing with it Katherine's 1-year anniversary in Colorado. The small church in Copper Creek was filled with townspeople curious to see Matthew Thorne, the confirmed bachelor, take a wife. Sarah Wilson served as maid of honor, her copper curls gleaming in the sunlight that streamed through the windows. Katherine wore a simple ivory dress with wildflowers in her hair. When she reached the altar where Matthew waited, his expression of stunned joy was worth every hardship she had endured. Their vows were straightforward, spoken with quiet conviction. The celebration afterward was lively, with music and dancing lasting well into the evening. As dusk fell, Matthew led Katherine away from the gathering. "Ready to go home?" he asked, his voice warm with promise. Home. The word had new meaning now, not just a place, but a person. Matthew helped her into the wagon that would carry them back to the ranch, their ranch now. As they traveled the familiar road, Katherine leaned against her husband's shoulder. Ahead, the cabin windows glowed with lamplight, welcoming them home. Behind them, the sun slipped beyond the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. "Beautiful," Katherine murmured. Matthew's arm tightened around her. "Yes," he agreed, but he wasn't looking at the sunset. In the valley that had once belonged to William Montgomery, a new chapter began, written not in the elegant script of city life, but in the bold, sweeping strokes of the frontier. For Katherine and Matthew, it was just the beginning of a story as vast and promising as the Colorado Territory itself.